Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Empire Soccer Report. I'm James Birle. Have a new guest today. I'm happy to be joined by Sean Hartnett of Southward Central, covering the Red Bulls and Gotham FC. Sean, it's been great getting to know you at the start of this MLS season. You're doing fantastic work with Southward Central. It's great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for the kind words. I really appreciate it. I've always been a fan of your work as well, James. I think you have a great career ahead of you, so I'm excited to see what you're going to be doing in the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Speaking of future, that's kind of been um, the identity of this current Red Bulls team this year. It's that, there is a future ahead for them. They have an identity that they are trying to build the foundation for. They have so many young players that are looking to, use this season as a jumping point for their careers. But the current moment that they're in feels like they're in a bit of a rut. It's been now 5 games across all competitions where they've yet to pick up a win. Their last victory in the league goes back to April 4th. Their last victory at all is against Pittsburgh Riverhounds of the USL Championship in the round of 32 of the Open Cup. Since I last had an episode, they have since lost in the round of 16 of the Open Cup to their Hudson River rivals in New York City FC. And then they fell on the weekend at home, both matches at home, to FC Dallas by 2-0, and they never really got going in that game, Sean. I did not have the privilege of being there. I believe you were with Southward Central. We'll start with that latest matchup. Not many changes in the 11. Tim Parker did come into the center of defense, a player we've been talking about, but overall, more of the same from these last few matches from New York. No shots on target and a 2-0 loss. What was your biggest takeaway from the match, Sean?
My biggest takeaway was that Parker and Mina came in and they kind of settled things in the back line. I thought it was the best defensive game from the Red Bulls for a while, but I felt like as the game was reaching the 60th minute mark, now, I'm not Michael Bradley. I don't have his vast football knowledge, but I would have brought on Choupo-Moting a lot earlier, given that he came on against Toronto earlier in the season. He scored a late goal. He's able to change the complexion of the match, create chaos in the box. He has a lot of like you think of him as like a target man, but he's so much more than that, and he has so much experience, and he's the kind of person who could shift the match. So I was kind of surprised that he was held off until I believe the 83rd minute. And, Sofo was chosen ahead of him. Other players were getting their chance before he got on the pitch. And Michael Bradley's been routinely describing this as, well, Julian Hall's a 9, Chupo's a 9. It's really like they're going up against each other in that competition. And given Julian Hall's form, you're not going to drop Julian Hall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, Chupo's the odd man out at the moment, unless Bradley decides to retinker his formation.
Yeah, and this is I don't want to call it a stubbornness because there's a negative connotation with that word, but there's a dogmatism to the way Michael Bradley has approached this season. He has a system. He has players who fit in that system. There's players that he wants to turn to when times get tough. But to have, Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, who scored 17 goals for you, DP, played at Bayern, played at PSG, played in the Premier League, you have that option off the bench, and this isn't now a one-off, this is now continuously wait until perhaps the dying moments of the game before turning to him. I mean, there's similar criticism after that Open Cup loss to NYCFC. I don't believe Choupo-Moting came on until the 78th minute. In that one, I don't have the number in front of me. So, but about 15 minutes in that match at most for Choupo. But again, it wasn't because they made zero attacking subs. Players did come on ahead of him. Mohamed Sofo, as well as Rafael Mosquera and Wen Benedetti. Those are all subs that you would consider to be in the attacking part of the pitch, but how many of those move the needle, especially in a game like they had on Saturday where, the offense couldn't get going. The consistency has been a big, big question mark for this team. Can they bring a positive performance over 90 minutes into the next week? Well, they did defensively in this one. The scoreline reads 2-0, but it was really a 1-0 game. That goal in the 88th minute, more of a consolation, an insurance goal than anything. The Red Bulls were in this game, but offensively is where they dropped the ball. What do you think led to that on Saturday?
It just seemed like they went flat. There wasn't ideas. There wasn't energy. It seemed like the Red Bulls kind of went off the boil. I mean, I think was Forsberg substituted at some point in the second half. He was substituted, right?
Around 66 minutes, I believe.
Yeah, I was going to say roughly the 70th minute.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's like do they really have a plan B for when things aren't working? Because when plan A is going well, you got Hall in the middle, you got Ruvalcaba, you got Cal. You see what they can do. You can see what Mehmeti does a little bit deeper in initiating attacks. Obviously, when you have the plan A and Forsberg's at the top of his game and he's has the energy to give you a full match, then the plan A works. It's just they don't have a plan B. And you would think like alter the formation, go and change it up, play a 4-4-2, put Choupo-Moting as even like a short striker with maybe Hall more advanced or vice versa. Switch it up in some kind of way when you're trailing, just so you're not reliant on this attacking 4-4-3 with the trident of Hall, Ruvalcaba, and Cal together in tandem. Because at the end of the day, if you're just playing one way all the time, eventually you're going to get found out. And unless you're the best team in the league, and unless you're in Miami
Mhm.
and you're constantly throwing Messi and other top class players at opposition, then you're going to need a plan B at some point, I believe. So I think I'm not telling Michael Bradley to go and throw it all away. I believe that there has to be some kind of alteration that comes along at some point in the season if his way doesn't continue on being something that the Red Bulls can rely upon for wins. And I know it is about the long term, and you want to see him be able to go and take his system and believe in it and stick with it. And I think Red Bull supporters want to see the fruits of that bear out over time. But it's
Mm.
just a matter of saying, you know what, maybe now at this time, we can at least have a plan B or some alternate options for when the plan A doesn't work and you're going to halftime down a goal.
And earlier in the season, haven't seen so much or any really of changing the shape, changing the formation, changing the responsibilities of particular players when they're in certain roles. But we did see a willingness to move players around in the team. There are several players playing in positions that you would not consider them to be their primary position. I mean, the most obvious version of that has been in the defense with the likes of Dylan Nealis playing exclusively as a center back this season. Um, Justin Shea playing as a center back when he was healthy. Emil Forsberg playing deeper in central midfield than we're used to seeing him. And early in the season, there was moments where Julian Hall and Eric Choupo-Moting were able to share the field. We've seen it a few times where Julian Hall moves over to the wing. The first substitution's either Cowell or Ruvalcaba, and then Choupo-Moting could get in. I think that's, without, like you said, you're not advocating to blow things up, to throw away the system because, and I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid here. I think, this is the right way to go about things. It's because, in years past, this club really hasn't had been so coherent in the way that they wanted to approach things. Yes, it's not always fun for fans to hear that, they are building towards something bigger than what they're doing. Fans want to win, rightfully so. And fans should be frustrated when you lose at home to your rival, when don't have a shot on goal in a match at home. That's rightfully going to frustrate your fans. But some of the willingness to move players around, maybe, I think, could have been welcome in a game like this, where you don't want to bring Julian Hall off the field, but you have to find a way to insert Choupo-Moting. Well, maybe when Cowell comes off at around the hour mark, Hall can go over to the wing. You bring off Cowell, you bring in Choupo-Moting, as opposed to going like for like with Sofo, like for like with Benedetti in central midfield. There's a few different ways to approach this, and I think that's maybe been the one big piece of criticism that we can offer towards Michael Bradley in his very, very young, admittedly, head coaching career is the conviction for always doing these same things, going about it. Because, like you said, teams are going to figure you out, and that's potentially could be. And I'm not saying it is yet, but it potentially could be a Achilles heel for the way Michael Bradley manages. And teams, I feel like, have started to figure out because the attack was very potent just mere weeks ago, and now it's been rendered very ineffective. This is now one goal in the last three matches, and really for stretches of all those games, they never really looked like scoring. They played well in the first half against FC Cincinnati to go back 2 games ago, but never really looked like breaking through. They had a very good 30 minutes of the first half against NYCFC. They scored that goal from Julian Hall, excellent finish, but then they were rendered ineffective in the second half.
Mhm.
Very good defense from NYCFC shut that game out. And now this is a 90-minute performance at home, admittedly on short rest, yes, against a solid FC Dallas team. But they looked toothless, feckless in the attack, and that begs the question: no, well, what's got to change if that's the way things are? They were able to rectify some of the things defensively, but now the issues lately feel like they've gone more on the attacking way. Um,
Right, and
before we,
you did
yeah,
mention that you could play Hall on the wing, but also earlier in the season, Bradley experimented by dropping Hall a little bit deeper into the
right,
eight. So my thought is, if Forsberg's out of battery, obviously he can't play 34 games, full tilt, 90 minutes a match. If he needs to come off and you put on Hall, I mean, you put Hall in his place, and then you bring Choupo-Moting up front. So you drop Hall deeper, put Choupo-Moting up front, play Hall in the eight. Maybe you have something there.
yeah, that's another idea, and I think maybe from what he saw from Julian Hall in that one game where he played as an eight against Montreal, maybe that was enough to suggest to him not to do it again.
Yeah, he
Um,
wasn't the most effective on that day, but at
it's
the same
another
time,
option.
Michael Bradley's all about patience and giving youth chances in different
Exactly.
places.
And so it feels to me like I don't want this whole episode to be let's jump on what Michael Bradley could do better, because I still think there are things that he's done the right way with this club, and I still believe that the club has been correct in trusting him with the future direction of this team. Um, but yeah, I think there's absolutely certain solutions that they can make within the roster to maybe sneak out, where a 2-0 loss becomes a 1-1 draw, things of that nature, where they can scrape in points, because there's going to be a big break coming up in a few weeks, and once they get the ball rolling again in the summer, post World Cup, it might be too difficult to make up some ground. This is MLS is very forgiving in that way, where you have a lot of opportunities later in your season to win things back. But with this big break in the middle, there's a really good chance that they could get left behind if they don't start to turn things around quickly. And missing the playoffs 2 years in a row, if I can speak for the fans, that would not go down well. So I suppose the idea there is to get ahead of the issue before it happens. But before we do talk about the upcoming game against Chicago Fire this weekend, a lot of personal things for Michael Bradley playing against former U.S. national team teammate and manager Greg Berhalter, where he spent a lot of his childhood when his father was coaching the very, very good Chicago Fire teams in the late 90s, early 2000s. Um, a lot of things to look out for in a very good Chicago team over the weekend. But like I said, those are some options within the roster that you could potentially search for to maybe right some wrongs, maybe fix some little details. Nothing drastic really could be done, I think, with the roster that they have now. It's not really a full roster. We've identified the areas in the team where they need to improve. Some depth in midfield. The center of defense needs to some upkeep for sure. And the left back position, Matty Dos Santos has been good, but to fully entrust that teenager with that spot feels a little bit early for him, and he may need some more help, more so than the likes of Joyo Masankabungi and Omar Valencia. So those are some areas on the pitch that maybe need some reinforcements. But what would you like to see in terms of maybe transfers in, transfers out? I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here because we don't really expect these things to happen. But if there were a few areas on the pitch that you would like to see reinforcements, improvements come in, where would they be and why?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with a glaring hole being center back.
Mm-hmm.
When you go into the season and you cast aside several experienced center backs, I know they brought in Volodare, but when you have your first choice being Shea and Nealis, they're both right backs by trade. So they're both kind of learning on the job. They're both trying to adjust somewhat. In the case of Shea, you're learning a new position and you're coming to Major League Soccer, and that's a big adjustment period. For Nealis, I think that he's someone who can be a useful player at both right back and in the middle. So it kind of takes some thinking right now. I know that you mentioned Dos Santos. He's a young player. He's continuing to be tested at this level, and I think some of the early returns from him are very good. But you could play Marshall Ruddy on the left,
Mm-hmm.
right? You could play Nealis on the right, and then once you bring in another center back, then you can have a more natural pairing. Maybe you go with Volodare and another center back, or Tim Parker and another center back, some kind of formation that works out. So at the end of the day, Red Bull need more options at the back. You mentioned correctly that they do need another left back depth, especially if Valencia isn't seeing much action. And I would imagine that I know that they've made some strides. They've signed Bazan, but Bazan's been brought along very slowly. So I'm not sure exactly at what point he's going to be ready. You mentioned Bungie. Like Bungie's on a short term loan,
Yeah.
right? So eventually he's going to go back to Leipzig, and he'll be out of the equation. So we'll see what happens when things open up. It's definitely something that Julian de Guzman's gonna have to press on with. And really for me, it's mostly the back. I think in central midfield, we've seen Doncourt take strides forward. We've seen, the huge stride forwards that Mehmeti's taking. I think you'll see more of Benedetti as the season goes along. I think he has a lot of promise. So I'm not really worried so much about that as I am the back.
Yeah, and you mentioned a few names there that are very relevant when you look at the Red Bull 2 lineup. Like you mentioned, they're slow rolling the introduction of Julian Bazan. In his two matches he's played now with Red Bull 2, he scored in the first one, assisted in the second one. You don't necessarily look to your back line to, bring about goal contributions, but if anything, that'll be great for that young player's confidence, his familiarity with the team, with the club. I imagine that they will try to integrate him with the first team as soon as possible. Joyuma Sankabungi also started in the 2-1 victory over Philadelphia Union 2 at the left back position. He had about an hour long cameo there. Again, his contract ends at the end of May, so he'll go back to Leipzig. I'm not sure what plans the organization has for him in the future, but he's only going to be here a short time. Dennis Yengor continues to play consistently well now with Red Bulls 2. We'll see if there's any sort of reintroduction with him to the first team. Andy Rojas consistently being used as a midfielder with the reserves. And then another, big name now with the first team, the longest tenured player with the club, Cameron Harper, got another appearance with Red Bulls 2, played about 4 minutes plus stoppage time off the bench. So now he's still working his way back. We got the chance to ask Michael Bradley about him today during the presser. This is now the second opportunity he's had with Red Bulls 2 since getting back into fitness from his knee injury, had a soft tissue hamstring injury, and those sort of setbacks are normal when you have a big operation. So happy to see that he's working his way back. Exciting to see him potentially get reintroduced to the first team at some point. Hope probably not before the World Cup. Hopefully after the World Cup, shortly after the World Cup. Cameron Harper, because he's a big spark plug for this team and has been in years past. So hope that he gets involved sooner rather than later. One other mention I'll make from Red Bulls too. Dennis Nelich with the goal over the weekend was named the MLS Next Pro. I believe they call it Rising Star of the Week, Player of the Week. Very good to see that he was able to pick up the recognition, the 18-year-old winger slash attacking midfielder. So very good there. Red Bulls 2 keeps rolling. I believe they've won 4 in a row now. So good on Dominic Voller and Red Bull 2, what they're doing, building for the future. We'll see if any of those players who are on first team contracts get reintroduced with the first team moving forward. With that said, let's talk about the upcoming matchup against Chicago Fire, kicking off at 2:30 on Saturday at Soldier Field, the legendary NFL stadium that is now being once again used for MLS. The Red Bulls going to Chicago. I prefaced it, Sean, with Michael Bradley's personal attachment to the city. Not only is he going up against a familiar face in Greg Berhalter in the managerial realm, but this is a place that he once called home in his early life for a long time when his father Bob was coaching with this team. And yet, it's also still a very difficult Chicago Fire team that's raised its profile significantly over the last few years in MLS. Went back to the playoffs last year and turned some heads. Now they're in the top 4 as the standings currently stand, but they're coming off a 3-2 loss from FC Cincinnati. The Chicago team, I'm not sure, Sean, how familiar you are with the makeup of the squad, but what are your early impressions of Chicago Fire this season under Greg Berhalter before Red Bulls face them this Saturday?
Well, I think we know that Zinkernagel and Kuipers are obviously the key danger man.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone off to a great start, fourth place. I expect it to be a very physical match. I think that's what Chicago is going to do. They're going to try to slow down Red Bull because Red Bull's going to go in the match. They're going to try to play on their front foot ways, and I think when you can slow down Red Bull, that's when you have the nights like you did against Dallas. So I think that Berhalter will be looking at what FC Dallas were able to do successfully against the Red Bulls and try to implement that within his system against the Red Bulls on Saturday.
And this Chicago team, admittedly coming off a 3-2 loss to FC Cincinnati, where they were actually up a man for most of that second half, even. And they lost it late in the 97th minute. Cincinnati stole 3 points from them in Chicago. So, this is a team that's going to be hungry for a victory. Losses in their last two matches, despite how good they've been, um, bounced out of the Open Cup to St. Louis, lost to FC Cincinnati in their most recent league match, and now they've got a vulnerable Red Bulls team in front of them, and they go several players deep at each position. Like it must be said how much depth that this iteration of the Chicago Fire have. You expect Zinkernagel and Kuipers to be the premier players in the attacking areas, but this is a team that brought Jonathan Bamba off the bench in their most recent MLS game. They had Marin Haile Selassie as the starter, and then in the midfield they've got several players that they could turn to, including former Red Bull transfer target in Anton Saletros, who has been a very, very welcome addition to this Chicago midfield, which actually, in terms of just the setup, operates very similarly, excuse me, to the way that Michael Bradley wants to operate this Red Bull team. So it's going to be almost like we saw with NYCFC, where the teams are more similar in makeup than they've ever been in the past. And you say that that's going to bring about a physical matchup. I completely agree. I think this one is going to be played very, very tightly in those midfield areas, and it's going to be about which individual players. And I think that advantage kind of leans towards Chicago, will be able to sniff out the right moments to go on and score. And I think ultimately this is going to be another big test for the Red Bulls defense, Sean.
So, James, you mentioned that there's some players who can make the key differences for Chicago, but also you have to remember that Forsberg is the type of player who thrives in tight areas, that he's able to do those little turns, those little movements that can create space within the defense, that he's able to thread through balls, that he's able to go and take that long shot from 30 yards out and hit it upper 90s. So, for me, like, I think when you think of players who can make differences in these tight games, Forsberg immediately springs to mind.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring up Forsberg because it's been now many games in a row where the Red Bulls haven't won. Not that Forsberg has particularly been poor in those games, but there hasn't been since really the Open Cup round of 32 against Pittsburgh Riverhounds, where he's really stepped up and been that key leader, that captain, that experienced special player to come out and steal a game like he has done in the past for this club. So I think this would be, excuse me, a very ripe opportunity for him to, restake his claim as, a key leader in the team. I tweeted out after the NYCFC Red Bulls game, admittedly, it was probably out of his control somewhat. But I would have preferred to have gotten the chance to speak with him in the aftermath of that game. When you lose at home to your biggest rival, you get eliminated in the cup competition for the very first time. My understanding is it's a captain's responsibility to go out and face the media, face the press after moments like that. Now, again, this was a very, very unique moment after the game where we had the away team manager speak in the conference room, then the home team, then they went to talk to a player, then we went back into the conference room and then talked to another player. So perhaps it was out of his control. I don't want to levy any individual criticisms at Emil Forsberg, but this is an opportunity now on the field in this coming game to really be a leader and steal points back for his team. And like you said, he absolutely has the quality to do that. And this could be the type of game where, that opportunity opens up for him. And he's coming off a game where he didn't play all 90 minutes, last two games now. So he should be, unless there is a underlying issue that we're not privy to, he should be fully ready to take on this match at 100% coming in on Saturday. And with that, let's read out some of the projected starting lineups. Let's start with the Red Bulls because they will be the visiting team. In goal, it's going to be Ethan Horvath, who I think, unfortunately for the result against Dallas, arguably his strongest performance of the season. I thought he was excellent when called upon against FC Dallas, so he'll be back in goal. I think Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy will resume his rightful position as the starting right back, although, like you mentioned, Juan Mina did add some stability. I think Dylan Nealis will play next to Robbie Volader. While Tim Parker, I've liked his game. Volader seems to be the favorite at the left center back position for Bradley. And then Matty Dos Santos will round out the back line on the left. Midfield trio, as you'd expect, Mehmeti, Donkor, Forsberg. And the front three, as you'd expect, Cowell, Hall, Ruvalcaba. Do you have any predictions that would differ from that in the starting 11, Sean? I mean, that's typically the starting 11 we've been accustomed to under Michael Bradley.
Or the only thing I want to add there is that there was a moment, I believe it was against Cincinnati, where Bradley was planning to start
Hmm.
Choupo-Moting, and Choupo-Moting had a late illness before the match. So I
Right.
think at some point he's going to give Hall a rest and play Choupo-Moting, maybe even thinking like if this is the time to do it, play Choupo-Moting in this match and then play Hall for the next three matches. Like kind of just squeeze everything you can out of Hall before the break. But that's just me like looking at it from the outside. That's not based on any kind of inside information.
Yeah, I think the idea to go with Choupo-Moting in that Cincinnati game might have been to preserve Hall with the Hudson River Derby coming up in the Open Cup midweek. And then, of course, with the illness, that kind of couldn't be the case. And then Julian Hall went and scored in the Open Cup round of 16 game anyway, and then has continued to play almost a full 90 minutes in each of the matches since. So, I mean, as you'd expect, young, fit player, very, very durable. But yeah, if you want to get a rest for Julian Hall, I think that would be a good idea, especially with only four more matches before the big break for the World Cup. And Choupo-Moting, considering continuing to sit along the bench when you feel like there maybe could be a way to get him more involved. I totally agree with that. Well, now let's take a look at the starting 11 potentially for the home side in Chicago Fire. Most recently, went through some changes in their back line, or excuse me, in across the entire team. But it's going to be Chris Brady in goal, who I think will most likely be the number 3 for the U.S. national team at the World Cup. Jonathan Dean at right back, Jack Elliott in the center of defense, Mbokazi in the center of defense. He's been very, very good since joining Chicago
He
Fire.
has been. Michael Bradley made a mention of him in today's press conference, saying how impressive he's been for Chicago as an incoming signing, and you just look at him and he's an absolute powerhouse.
Mm-hmm. And that's speaking of powerhouse. That's one of the most formidable, in my opinion, center defense pairings in Major League Soccer with Jack Elliott, who for many years the anchor of the backline in Philadelphia. Now a new task in Chicago. Former Red Bull New York fullback Andrew Gutman will start on the left. I think he's one of the most underrated fullbacks in Major League Soccer. Has been amongst the top of the league's left backs for um, the better part of half a decade now. I've really been impressed with him and his ability to stay relevant despite bouncing from multiple different teams within MLS. It's a very difficult thing to do, and he's done just that. I think in the sixth position will be Jay Davila, Anton Celetros, and Robin Lode will likely be ahead of him. And then the front three will be the danger man, Philip Zinkernagel, Hugo Kuipers, and they could go with Marin Haile Selassie, but because he got the start in the last game, I think they're going to go with Jonathan Bamba. That is a really, really strong starting 11, Sean. They're currently fourth in the Eastern Conference. I think they have the juice to actually stay within the top four through the rest of the season. Although, of course, if you look at the table, things are really, really tight right now. Before we get into the scoreline predictions for the match, um, do you think that the Chicago Fire can continue to be like this formidable of a force in the Eastern Conference for the rest of the season?
I do see them finishing in the top five. I think they're going to maintain it over the course of the season, especially with the World Cup break coming up. Give them a chance for some other guys to recharge. I think they'll maintain it. I think they'll be in the top five in the East.
Yeah, and this is that starting 11. That's without Andre Franco in central midfield. That's without Haile Selassie in the front three. That's without Joel Waterman, who is an option to make the World Cup squad for Canada in the center of defense. This is a team that goes several players deep in each area of the pitch. So this is a very good Chicago Fire team. It's been a while since we've been able to say that about the Chicago Fire, about 7 or 8 years since they've been at this level. So very, very excited for them. And Greg Berhalter, I am going to put you on the hot seat now. Can I get a
Oh
score
boy.
prediction for the match?
2-1 Chicago.
I was going to say 2-1 Chicago, but considering the players that they have up front, I think I'll go 3-1 Chicago. And I would take your recommendation. I think Emil Forsberg will get the goal for the Red Bulls. I think this will be a game where he sticks out, but ultimately the individual quality in the front third will be too much for the Red Bulls defense from Chicago. So ultimately, maybe another disappointing one for the Red Bulls, things starting to trend in the wrong direction, but now they have a big week to potentially come back from whatever Saturday looks like. They face the Columbus Crew on Wednesday at home, and then they get another crack at NYCFC on Saturday before rounding things up the following week in Sporting KC to go into the World Cup break. Well, Sean Hartnett of South Ward Central. Thank you so much for jumping on the show. Can you let folks know where to find your work and any exciting things you might have coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. So my outlet is Southward Central. It's a fairly new outlet covering both Red Bull New York and Gotham FC. We've been around for a little bit more than 2 months, and it's an independent outlet. It's giving you beat level coverage of local teams. So the handles for that is Southward Central on all platforms, aside from Mr. Musk's Twitter/X that cuts it down to 15 characters. So it's Southward Central everywhere except for X, and that's Southward CTR on X.
Well, Sean, I want to say I think you've been doing such an unbelievably good job with Southport Central. For anybody who are fans of the Red Bulls or Gotham or both, or just want to be, tied in, tuned in on the local soccer scene, absolutely check out Southport Central. One of the best, if not the very best, written outlet doing supporting these local teams in the area. So definitely check that out. And you know what? Before you go, let's chat for a minute or two about Gotham before we say
Yeah, sure.
goodbye, because it was
Absolutely.
a now 3 wins in a row. A slow-ish start to the season. They got a bunch of clean sheets from Katrin Berger, who's, as you would expect, among the top of the league in terms of one of the best goalkeepers in North America. But now a win over Bay FC, a win over Chicago Stars, and a win over Racing Louisville at home. Things are starting to look up for Gotham. What should fans be excited about for the Bats?
I think that Jordan Dudley is the top of that list because you had a really great rookie last year in Lily Reel on the back line.
Mhm.
And now you have a great rookie in a forward position in Jordan Dudley. And ever since I first saw her play, she is exciting. She really causes havoc for defenses. And I think that she's going to go all the way and probably be right up there among the Rookie of the Year candidates. I know Juan Carlos Amorós recently said the same himself in his post-game press conference. But I think when you look at a young player like her who's so exciting, and when you see her play, she draws so many defenders and she has so many nuances to her game for such a young player who's fresh out of college. She's extremely exciting. And then you bring in Guru Wrighton, who's been playing as a makeshift left back right now. But once they get healthier and Lily Reel returns to left back, you're going to see Guru playing on her preferred left wing role. And I think she's going to create a lot of opportunities for Gotham. And we saw the early troubles they had with goal scoring. You had Jaden Shaw, who wasn't playing at 100% for a while, some more injuries that they went through. But now the squad's getting a little bit healthier. Eventually, you're going to see Mandy Freeman come back. You're going to see Bruinha come back. You're going to see Sonnet come back. So the back line will be stabilized. And then you have all those attacking talents. When you throw Rose Lavelle,
Mhm.
Esther, Midge Purse, all these players all coming at you. I find it like how is Gotham going to get stopped when they're operating like they can when they're at their peak? Even Mitch Purse in her post game interview in the mix zone, she said like we're just getting started here. Like this is
Mhm.
nowhere near how good we can be, and I think they'll probably be proven out over time, and that this season will be the season where Gotham is consistent in the regular season as opposed to what happened last year where they trailed off at the end of the year.
Yeah, and to be able to have strung together so many good performances and now 3 wins in a row in the league with Mitch Purse as a right back, right? Without Emily Sonnet in the team, with Jaden Shaw still working back to 100%, like this is impressive stuff, man. And if you're not checking out Gotham FC and you're a soccer fan in the area, don't wait until they get to the playoffs and the tickets start to jump up and it's harder to get a seat because this team is already turning heads as it is now. Yeah, and you mentioned now with Jordan Dudley, this could be what 3 seasons in a row where they have a really good rookie player because you mentioned Lily Reel from last year. Go back a year prior to Jenna Neiswanger. This has been a jumping off point for so many players now in years past, and this is the reigning champs. This is the two-time national champs in the past 3 years, team that threatens in CONCACAF. This is the premier team in North America, if you ask me. And Rose Lavelle, who is arguably the shining star of the U.S. women's national team at the moment, gets into the league's best 11 in the last week, and she's back to her best. So exciting stuff for Gotham. Appreciate you sharing some of your close expertise of the team there, Sean. And
Yeah.
thanks again for sharing anything about Gotham. Any last words before we sign off today?
Yeah, I just want to say that if you are a follower of Gotham, we have two very big exclusive interviews coming up. One is going to be tomorrow, and the next will be, well, depending on when this goes out.
Mhm.
The first interview will be on Friday, and the second interview will be coming next week. That's really all I can disclose for now, but I know they're both that the fans will be very excited about.
We'll definitely keep an eye out for those from Sean Hartnett of Southward Central. Sean, thanks again for jumping on the show. If you haven't checked out Southward Central yet, please do so. He's doing fantastic work over there. And thanks again for jumping on the show. You have it as a 2-1 win for the Chicago Fire. I also have it as a win for the Fire, but I'm going to say 3-1 defeat. The Red Bulls are going to have a tough battle ahead of them on Saturday. But for Sean Hartnett of Southport Central, I've been James Birle. This has been Empire Soccer Report. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you next time.